Did we find Brock Purdy's kryptonite Sunday in Cleveland? The fallout from the 49ers loss in week 6. Shanahan game plan ruined. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate all the everydayers subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by the Gametime app. Download Gametime, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Croc. Brock Purdy followed up his best game of his young career with the worst game of his young career. Week 6 against the Cleveland Browns. 49ers lost that game. If you're just tuning in here for the first time, we've got a whole Rapid React episode from Sunday evening that was live for you Sunday night, Monday morning after the game. So kind of rewatching the game, looking at how things went. Brock Purdy was not good. Brock Purdy was not able to hold on to the ball well in the rain, Croc. It would be a hell of a kryptonite for somebody if your kryptonite covers 70% of the earth. Because I think water might be Brock Purdy's kryptonite. If we have a sample, because I was trying to think back. I was racking my brain, and I was asked multiple times from some of our listeners and some folks on social media, did Brock Purdy have a tough time at Iowa State throwing in the rain? And I just didn't watch enough Iowa State to remember. If there's any Cyclones fans out there, let us know what Brock Purdy looked like in the rain. We're going to talk a little bit about his measurables and his hand size and stuff like that in a bit. But I can't remember last year if he played much in the rain. And you might have to face, the weather's turning a little bit. You might have to see some of that, especially in the month of January. There's going to be a lot of teams with good defenses and potentially some bad weather, which is what we saw Sunday with the Cleveland Browns. So just anecdotally, a sample size of 1 of 1, Brock Purdy didn't play well and didn't throw the ball well in the rain. And until we have a larger sample, I don't know what to think about this. It could be a problem if they face a bad weather team in January.
That was the first thing I thought of. Like, did he have an issue with this at Iowa State? But ultimately, you watch him in this game, there were a few that definitely got away from him. And, I talked to you about how, my hands aren't like tiny, but they're not like big. Like, I don't have these massive quarterback hands. I have 9.5-inch hands. I think that's similar to yours. And I measure mine with like the little thin measuring tape or whatever. So yeah, I actually have a little ruler right here. I can measure with. Yeah, but they go thumb to pinky. So my hands aren't like small, but they're not like huge. So, but I know a difference when my guy Greg Pinelli, he grips the ball and throws it as opposed to me. And it just feels like looks like he has more control over it. And me, I like having fun throwing the football around, but I can tell a difference between just how it looks and how it feels when I throw a football in comparison to Greg. It just comes out of his hands different. The way he's able to just grip the football is different. And that extra half-inch that guys, because they used to have kind of this, not a cutoff, but they wanted guys with like the 10-inch hands. It just comes out of their hands a little different. Now, anybody can be the exception. I think Mike Vick has like the smallest hands in like combine era, and he was letting it rip, right? I mean,
it was powerful, strong arm. I think the two smallest that I can think of offhand were Kenny Pickett, who was in Brock Purdy's draft class, the first quarterback selected in 2022, and Mike Vick. They were both sub 9-inch hands. And Alex Smith, remember when he came out, I think he was 9 1/8. He was like 9 inches or 9 1/8 hands. And remember his whole, I don't know if you remember back in the day, everyone was like, small hands, Alex Smith, he's going to suck because he's got small hands. It's like the first time ever. I think the first time I even realized that they measured hands at the combine, in 2005. It's like, okay, Alex Smith has small hands. Brock Purdy's got bigger hands than that. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen here. This is the web graph from mockdraftable.com. Brock Purdy's combine performance. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll explain it as well for the audio listeners. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see his closest comparisons to his measurables on the left side of the screen as well. So his closest comparable player is actually Baker Mayfield. A lot of it's, height, weight too, and not just hand size or anything like that. But Zach Wilson among his highest comps, as well as Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. So his web graph is hilarious. And we showed this on the podcast way back when he was drafted too. He has 9 1/4 inch hands, which is 24th percentile amongst combine participants. So they're small, they're below average size hands, but they're kind of at the cutoff, right? You don't want smaller than 9-inch hands for sure. You don't want smaller than 9 1/4, 9 1/2. You want at least to be kind of there. That's kind of where Brock Purdy is. So he doesn't have the biggest hands. Croc, you and I both have slightly bigger hands than Brock Purdy, and it's still not. I'm still not gripping a football fully comfortable sometimes. And so, hand strength is a big part of it too, but it's hilarious because when you look at Brock Purdy's web graph, everything's under 50th percentile comparables, as far as the measurables go, except for his 10-yard split, 90th percentile. Like he's got one of the best 10-yard splits ever for a quarterback. 40-yard dash time at 4.8 was not terrible. I'll slide down so we can see the numbers. So he was at the combine. Brock Purdy was 6 feet and 5/8 of an inch, so just under 6'1", 212 pounds. He has short arms, really short arms. First percentile arm length, 29-inch arms, and second percentile wingspan, 70 1/8 inch wingspan. 9 1/4 inch hand size, which is 24th percentile. Really great 10-yard split. And you see that movement in the pocket. 1.55 10-yard split. That's like slot receiver. That's like elite level movement in the 10-yard especially for a guy who ran a 4.84 40-yard dash, which is about 45th percentile for quarterbacks. And this is all comparable for the quarterbacks with the percentiles, by the way. And then a vertical jump of 27 inches, which is 10th percentile. And you see a lot of this stuff in play. And did we just see the hand size part of it in play? Like we see the 10-yard split in play every week. So again, it's not tiny hands situation, but he doesn't have the biggest hands either. Is that a factor in it? I don't know. Is this even a factor at all? It was just a weird game, and really the rain wasn't a big factor. I don't know. We're gonna have to see a bigger sample, but it's something to look at and be like, that's really interesting. But what's crazy is how short his arms are, and this doesn't really have anything to do with playing quarterback necessarily. Probably helps him whip the ball out a little bit quicker. But his 70 1/8 inch wingspan is almost a foot smaller than Brandon Ayuk's wingspan, because Brandon Ayuk has these really long arms and these crazy broad shoulders. And so Brandon Ayuk has like offensive tackle wingspan. And it's pretty amazing how much smaller Brock Purdy's wingspan is than someone like Brandon Ayuk, who's not too far off from a height weight perspective.
Yeah. The good thing for Brock Purdy is, regardless of the intangibles and, all these things, or not the intangible, but the measurables, the intangibles, right? Like some of the things that you can't teach with him, or you could try to teach, but he just gets it. He's just grasp it. He is like an A+ at those things. So he might be 1 percentile in arm length and might have these short, stubby arms, but his ability to process really quick and get the ball out is in the 90th percentile. I would assume if you compare him to quarterbacks in this draft class. So
it's right there with
the reasons why he's going to be successful will look drastically different than the reasons why Kyler Murray would be successful, and which also might be why we've seen Brock have a different level of success. Now, again, he's not taking over that Arizona Cardinals team that Kyler Murray took over, and he's kind of been up and down with his weapons as well. But when you think about the work ethic and, the study habits and just the understanding, and maybe not being able to rely on some of the other things like having a bigger arm or being just, straight line speed faster, he has to play a different way and process a different way. And I think he does that as one of the best, probably in his class for sure.
So, we're kind of tongue in cheek talking about Brock Purdy's kryptonite being the rain, being water, being wet footballs, but it didn't look great on Sunday. So it's something just to put away, put it in the memory bank. And it would make you feel a lot better to see Brock Purdy sling it a little bit better in the rain and in some bad conditions in a future football game, because there's going to be no doubt over the course of Brock Purdy's career, especially if the 49ers are playing a lot of games in January, there's going to be some bad weather football, and the 49ers are going to have to win those football games. And it's going to be something that and I bring it up because we're going to think about it. If it's raining, the only thing I'm going to think about now is, can Brock Purdy throw? Right.
And can Jake Moody kick in the rain?
Right, exactly. Right or wrong, those are the two things that's going to come to mind, right? When we see a football game, like, it's windy, Jake Moody can't make a kick, right? Oh, can Jake Moody make a game winner, right? And so as soon as a game like Sunday happens, those are the things that are going to come to your mind, because that's all we've seen. We've seen Jake Moody attempt one game winner, and he missed it. We've seen Brock Purdy throw one time in the rain that I can remember. And correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there was some rainy games last year that I don't remember. But at BD Peacock, at Eric _Crocker, in the comments on YouTube, let us know if there's some bigger samples of or some Iowa State games we can go back to watch. Although it's a different football they're throwing, obviously, in college than in the NFL for Brock Purdy. Did we find Brock Purdy's kryptonite that covers 70% of the stinking earth? Okay. Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, some pretty important names. Injury updates there and how it wrecked Kyle Shanahan's game plan Sunday. Do those injuries wreck his game plan going forward as well? Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Do you ever feel like your brain is kind of getting in its own way? And I know that happens to me all the time. Can't shut it off when you need to go to sleep. Can't turn it back on when you need to. And you wake up in the morning and you're trying to function and record things like podcasts first thing, and just kind of not letting you finish the business you need to finish on your day-to-day, your week-to-week. Like how you should do, and you know what's good for you, but you just can't quite get it done. Therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. And we have a very special offer for our listeners. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you don't quite hit it off with that therapist, you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is also brought to you by DoorDash. You've trusted DoorDash for so long to bring you that meal you're looking for, right? And you don't want to go get it yourself. You wanted to get it to your door. You can do the same thing now with your groceries, right? Did the game go to timeout? Time to order in with DoorDash. Is it halftime? That's ordering time. 2-minute warning, you got it. That's your cue to order in. So whatever it is you need, DoorDash has you covered. Whenever the game clock stops, that's time to order with DoorDash. Order pizza, wings, soda, burgers, anything you want, chips, nachos, everything that you could possibly need. And as I mentioned, groceries as well with DoorDash. Kickback and kickoff at unbeatable deals, everything you need for your watch party or your tailgate. And a special offer for our listeners. Get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKEDON23. Subject to change. Terms apply. Again, don't forget to use code LOCKEDON23 for 50% off up to $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Again, terms apply. Okay, Croc. We have some updates here and kind of vague updates, which is unfortunate. I was hoping to hear 2 weeks, right? Ready to go this week, but I guess it's better than nothing. There's speculation from some online doctors, some football watching doctors out there, which for some reason there's like 1 million doctors now that you can just I kind of like it, right? Because people are like, oh, I've dealt with this. I've seen this before. That looks like a high ankle sprain. And so that's what I'm hearing is like, oh, that looks like what the type of injury a high ankle sprain is. Now, Trent Williams was able to come back into the game. He clearly wasn't 100% after he came back in the game. But right now, Croc, I think the official word is out of 49ers HQ day-to-day for Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel. Those are two pretty big losses, but day-to-day is better than them saying, oh, he's going to go on IR and he's for sure out for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, well, as we're recording this right now, we don't know what's going on with Christian McCaffrey. So I'd much rather hear the day-to-day as opposed to hearing, oh, well, we'll see. We'll hear about the MRI from Christian McCaffrey, which we still don't even know what the heck was going on. Now, I was watching the game around a lot of people at the casino out in Reno, so I couldn't hear the broadcast very well over people, just talking and cheering and whatnot. But maybe you can kind of fill me in on it, what exactly was going on with him. They were showing him on the sideline, stretching, kind of, rubbing, it looked like his shoulder maybe, and you saw him doing all kind of things, but what were they saying about it?
It was an oblique injury. And it's funny because he looked like he was beat up and battered, but that wasn't the injury. The injury was just a soft tissue oblique injury, and clearly he wanted to get back in the game because they showed him and he was pulled out of the game because of the injury, and he's on the sideline and they checked on him and he's standing there, got blood on his jersey. It's all ripped up. But he's trying to get back into the game. He wasn't taking his helmet off or anything like that, right? So I could tell he wanted to get back in the game. He came into the game, one play, they yanked him back out, and then he was into the locker room, and that was it for him. So it's an oblique injury right now, and we're waiting on an MRI as well. So, again, kind of vague on all of them. I think it's probably better news to hear that they're not still waiting on an MRI for a potential high ankle sprain for Trent Williams. So day-to-day on both Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams, and we're still awaiting MRI results for Christian McCaffrey to know exactly what's going on there, how bad that could potentially be. But that's one of those injuries. I've had an oblique injury, and man, it shuts you down. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't reach the top shelf to get a bag of chips out of the cupboard. Right? I definitely couldn't play basketball. I couldn't play softball. Couldn't throw. Couldn't swing. I didn't have Toradol at my disposal, so maybe things will be a little bit different for Christian McCaffrey. And clearly, when he's going to go when he's able to go. But they might have to save himself from himself a little bit because he was, again, we're talking about January, right? Trying to win games in January. We're talking about bad weather in January. How about having Christian McCaffrey healthy in January? Because if he's this beat up in week 6, I don't want this thing to linger. I would much rather see Christian McCaffrey sit for 2 weeks than go out there and have this injury that maybe potentially is getting worse.
I think the fortunate thing here is that it doesn't or it hasn't yet come off as like a long-term injury, because the one thing I don't want to know is what life is like without Christian McCaffrey. You look at the stats, he's played every game for the 49ers. He scored a touchdown in every game. He's such a huge impact on his team. His vision, when he scored, was it the screenplay? Just the way that he maneuvered through there, then made a move on top of another move and kind of set the blockers up and then kind of squeezed out to the sideline.
I thought he was going to go inside, and I thought he could still score if he went inside. And he was like, boop, still pick. No, I'm going back outside, actually. And then actually set that block up for himself nice and made it even an easier path to get in the end zone.
And, I mean, he ripped off a big run. I mean, if you just kind of judge his game off of the first drive of the game, you thought he was going to have a monstrous game. And then it kind of slowed down after that. And he was kind of taking some hits, and there wasn't really much space for him to run. And then you kind of saw him start to get a little shut down by that team until ultimately he was shut down by his own team, had to go into the locker room. I don't want to know what it's like without him having him on the field, but I do understand, if a guy is banged up, if he needs to rest, then hey man, rest him. But I think now at least the fans will start to respect some of these opponents a little bit more and just know that on any given Sunday, even a team with PJ Walker, which to me, that was the biggest hurdle out of all that. Like, I just couldn't see the third string quarterback, PJ Walker, leading a team past the 49ers. And ultimately it was more the defense, the run game kind of got going. Amari Cooper made a few plays, but it was like the others really helping out a quarterback who, threw multiple interceptions. Things like that is what it's going to take. But also I think a big part of it is not having Christian McCaffrey in for, a stretch in the game, not having Deebo Samuel at all for the second half of that game. And if you have to play like that moving forward, you can see how that can kind of impact the 49ers offense. Now, luckily they don't play the Cleveland Browns defense every week, but even then there was a little clunkiness to the offense, and a lot of it had to do with timing, some drops, some bad passes. I don't want to see that again.
On that note, Croc, I want to talk about Christian McCaffrey, playing without Christian McCaffrey, playing without Trent and Deebo as well, what it means going forward, what it meant on Sunday, and how those things might be, I think, a little and maybe very different in my view. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, whether it's a 49ers game, sporting event, college football, baseball, NBA season getting going, right? NHL, concerts, comedy shows, whatever it is near you, you can find those tickets at Gametime. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices with your total upfront, so you don't get that extra hidden fee that you didn't see coming, which drives me crazy anytime I'm buying tickets for anything. And it only takes a few seconds, a couple taps, you buy some tickets, and you don't have to go fishing through your emails because it's right there on the app for you with your tickets when you get to your event. All you have to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So, for those of you, for Croc, for you, for those listeners that are that might be worried about Christian McCaffrey the most and playing without Christian McCaffrey the most, you came to the right podcast and you came to the right guy, because I am the chairperson of the West Coast chapter of Running Backs Don't Matter. And I've never seen a running back matter for the 49ers or for a lot of teams more than, maybe Derrick Henry in Tennessee, right? That matters more than Christian McCaffrey has. And he has been more impactful than I ever could have imagined. And a lot of it's because the extra stuff he does beyond just being a running back. But the San Francisco 49ers last year, with the help of, Brock Purdy's and Christian McCaffrey's and, the same crew that had been there before, 49ers got to the NFC Championship game, right, Croc? And they lost. The year before, without Brock Purdy, without Christian McCaffrey, how did the 49ers season end? Same exact place, NFC Championship game. The 49ers without Christian McCaffrey can go to the NFC Championship game. The 49ers without Christian McCaffrey can have a 5.5, 6 yard rusher. The 49ers, other running backs last year, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, still on the roster, looking healthy going into week 7, 6 yards per carry last year. Kyle Shanahan offenses, what do? They run the ball. The 49ers will run the football. They did before Christian McCaffrey. They will after Christian McCaffrey. Will it be as good? Will it be as dynamic offensively without Christian McCaffrey? Probably not. Christian McCaffrey's a dude, right? And that's not something you just replace one for one. But if you get the wide back in there, if you have Brandon Ayuk, Jordan Mason, if you have Elijah Mitchell playing at the level he has in the past, I love Jordan Mason, by the way. I think he would be, I kind of want to see him get a full game just to see what that looks like, right, with this group. The 49ers will be okay until Christian McCaffrey's oblique heals. That's sort of my point here. And I think a bigger factor in the Cleveland game is because, especially if we watch, what did the first drive look like? The first quarter of the game, what did it look like, right? Nearly 100% Christian McCaffrey and Deebo. And then they both got hurt, especially Deebo. This was going to be a Deebo game. Kyle Shanahan was probably sitting there like, oh, shoot, I got to flip over the card because this whole side of the card is all Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, right? So I think this game specifically, the fact that the injuries happened mid-game after they had practiced all this stuff all week, probably installed some extra special stuff they didn't get to use with Deebo because he got hurt. Trent Williams on top of it getting hurt with that matchup with Myles Garrett, which is a titanic battle. I think it hurt more having those guys get hurt, especially Deebo, early in the game and mid-game. It hurts more because they were such a huge part of what I think this game plan was supposed to be and what it was for the 49ers against the Cleveland Browns. Quick hitters, getting the ball out early, catch and run type stuff. So on a normal week, if they're out, I think the game plan will be different, and I think it'll be a lot easier to maneuver around and game plan around those absences than it was in this game because the timing was just so bad because I think they were a huge part of the game plan. Then all of a sudden, those pieces taken right out of the game plan from Kyle Shanahan. And listening to him talk about it after the game, I think it kind of solidified what we saw on the field. The way he talked about it is, yeah, that was tough because we had to completely change our entire plan of attack against that Browns defense because of the injuries that happened.
Yeah, and that's always tough. And one thing that can really kind of soften this blow if you're not going to have Christian McCaffrey out there, again, and we're speculating right now, we'll know for sure probably by, or not for sure, but we'll know more of what's going on by Wednesday. But if you're not going to have him out there or Deebo Samuel, can you finally maybe really put an emphasis on getting George Kittle involved? I looked through his game log, and it's really odd. You see one game against the Giants where he was heavily involved. I think he got like 9 targets. You watch him against the Cowboys, he scored 3 touchdowns. But outside of that, it is really weird in the other games. I'm talking about 1 target, 2 targets, 1 target, 2 target. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous for a player that is as skilled and as talented as him. And I understand, when people say, well, you have to use him as a blocker at times. Like, cool. But when he's not blocking, you should be trying to emphasize getting him the ball, especially if you don't have Deebo Samuel or George Kittle out there. Or Christian McCaffrey out there. George Kittle is a matchup nightmare. He's someone that is hard to defend. And I've said it before, if he were on a team like Kansas City, where it's just like, we're just going to feature our tight end and get the ball in his hands however we can, George Kittle would have 100+ catches every season and go for 1,300 yards. He's still the best run-after-catch guy in the league. But the Niners don't utilize him like that, and I understand, but it's still odd that someone with so much talent is kind of the one that ends up being put on the back burner. I mean, there were times during his career when they'd give him, end arounds, and they'd motion him and then give him jet sweeps and have him hit the corner and he'd run for 10 yards in the game. They used to find different ways to give him the ball, and now it feels like he's kind of the odd man out, but he might be able to come alive if a couple of those guys can't go.
And he's still good working the intermediate part of the field, which is where Brock Purdy's great throwing the football too. And I think it's clearly they haven't made an emphasis on getting him the ball because Kyle's dialing things up for other players. But man, all those Y leaks, right? Getting a George Kittle wide open. We haven't seen a lot of that stuff. Even last week, George Kittle against the Cowboys, he had 3 touchdowns, but I think he was only targeted those 3 times, and that was it. And a lot of it is, I think, Brock Purdy finding him just through the natural progression, and especially that first touchdown last week, making the play. Obviously, the trick play was dialed up just to get him the ball, but I can't think of a play this year aside from that flea flicker where it was like, oh, this play was designed to get George Kittle the football in space. And so I would like to see more of that every week. And if there's no Christian McCaffrey, no Deebo Samuel, I think for sure we're going to have to see it next week for Kyle Shanahan's offense.
So I pulled up his stat sheet so I can have the official numbers right here in front of me. All right. The 49ers have played in, 6 games. Week 1, he had 6 targets. He caught 3 for 19 yards. That's not great. Week 2 against the Rams, 3 targets, 3 catches for 30 yards. All right. Now, this is when he started to heat up a little bit. I guess you could say that. Against the Giants, he had 7 catches on 9 targets, 90 yards. That was a big-time game of his.
Yeah.
The very next week, when you think, okay, they're going to start utilizing George Kittle some more. Nope, Brandon Ayuk's back, so now you got to get back on this back burner. 1 target, 1 catch, 9 yards against Arizona. Then you go and play Dallas, and you were almost right. You talked about his 3 catches, which were 3 touchdowns, but he had 4 targets. Okay. So, and obviously, I think the 38-yard one was the one that was really schemed up. And then last game, 2 targets, 1 catch. And I think there was one more target, but they called a penalty on it. So, obviously they don't factor that into the stats. It's really just, it's odd for someone that is that talented. And I understand that there are a lot of weapons. I understand that. But to see the usage be this low, I mean, we're talking about a guy who can't even really get 5 targets a game. When before you and I were saying, man, he needs like 8 or 9 a game. Okay, there's a lot of guys, I understand that. He's struggling to get 5 targets, a guy that is as talented as he is. And everybody talks about his blocking, but I've heard him speak on, it's like, I would love to catch the ball. Like, obviously, I'm going to do what they asked me to do, but I would love to catch the ball. He takes pride in just playing football, and I think he has a fun time doing it. But you'd be a fool to think that he wouldn't love to see more targets and more usage because he puts in a lot of work in the offseason. I watch him with the receiver coach. I watch how he trains. I watch how he's moving. They do the tight end U. They're catching passes and doing things there. And then he gets in the game and it's like 2 targets in a game where the offense is sputtering and they don't use them. Those are the games. They're lucky it's George Kittle and not a guy like Terrell Owens. because Terrell Owens, where everybody felt like he was this like crazy person or like selfish, and maybe he had a little bit of that in him or whatever. But his biggest issue is we aren't going to lose this game, and you're not using me.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to lose, you better have tried to get me the ball, and it just didn't work. But you're not throwing the ball to me, and we're losing games. Absolutely not. And that's when T.O. would lose his cool. That's when guys like Des Bryant would lose his cool on the sideline. He show those outbursts when it's a game where it's like, I can help us win. What? It's not about me. It's about helping us win. And we're losing. And I have 2 targets. What are we doing? I wish he had a little bit more of him in that. And I like him not being the selfish person, of course. But I wish he had a little bit more of like, Kyle, like, come on, man. Get me involved here so I can help this team. We're down CMC. We're down Deebo Samuel. This is when I'm supposed to come through right now. I'm one of the highest paid tight ends in the league, and I'm an afterthought. I see 2 targets in the game, one which was on one of the first drives of the game.
And to add to that, we've heard a lot of people say, maybe it's a good thing that the 49ers lost this game, and it's a wake-up call, and, they can learn from it. And we knew they weren't going to go undefeated all season anyway. And it'll make them better in the long run. Maybe it would make the 49ers better in the long run. It's almost as if Kyle has used Christian McCaffrey a little bit because he's so good, using him as a crutch and overusing him. Kind of remind him that, we can still run the ball. We can give you some rest. We can still make plays with these other playmakers. Get him reacquainted with dialing up some Y leaks and some fun plays for George Kittle. More stuff for Brandon Ayuk. Deebo, if he plays and not Christian McCaffrey, you might see a little wide back, a little bit of fun stuff for Deebo Samuel, right? And then Kyle will be like more comfortable with the entirety of the offense and not just force feeding Christian McCaffrey the football. So potentially some good to come from all of this, I think, for the 49ers in a week that wasn't the greatest when you have a loss and you have the injuries that the 49ers did. I do want to thank everybody, especially the everydayers out there, for tuning in with us. You can always subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you find your audio podcasts as well. Croc and I will be back tomorrow with Nicholas Winkler, our Winky Wednesday. And you can bet we're going to ask him if he jinxed the San Francisco 49ers and if there might be a couple more losses coming, because he has a better record than any team in the NFL right now as far as picking 49ers games. He's 6-0. There are still no unbeaten teams in the NFL this year. And he's nailed the 49ers all 6 games, 5 straight wins and a loss. So we'll talk with Wink about that on Wednesday. See if we can get him to change his predictions to some more W's coming up for the 49ers schedule. And, of course, turn the page to Week 7 and beyond. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Croc and I back tomorrow. Locked On 49ers.
Subscribe to this video.